I have something to say about this card right here. Welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today, I'm doing a little rant video on this card because I think it's getting blown a little bit out of proportion for pretty much ever since it got released. You know, this card is phenomenal. We all know this card is great. It's a very powerful card, especially because it is so generic, just needs monsters with different names except for tokens. If you don't know about APOLLOUSA, we'll just read it real quick before I get into this. It takes 2 monsters with different names except tokens, so 2+ monsters. You can only control 1 APOLLOUSA at a time. The original attack of this card becomes 800 times the number of link materials used for its link summon, and its last effect once per chain. When your opponent activates a monster effect, quick effect, you can make this card lose exactly 800 attack, and if you do, negate the activation. So pretty much, once per turn, just once per chain, you're able to negate multiple monster effects throughout the course of your opponent's turn, or even your turn as well, turning off some stuff, protecting yourself. Because it's so generic, it is a phenomenal card. If this wasn't generic and it was a little more specific, it would make it much worse. But because it's like any deck now that can just spam the board, has access to multiple interruptions here, this card is phenomenal. But here's my problem. Because I pay attention pretty large in part to the Yugi tuber community, I see videos left and right all the time of whatever the newest, coolest combo deck, Emancipator, Pendulum people get excited about, Rockets, whatever it is, whatever the combo deck is, and you just see, 6 to 9 negates. Like, this deck is so explosive and crazy, and really half of those negates are presumably coming from APOLLOUSA. And my problem with that is that APOLLOUSA never actually represents how many negates it can theoretically have. It just never does. There are ways to protect it, but it has its weaknesses. So, like, mainly, I would say probably 70 to 80% of the time, APOLLOUSA is being made with 3 materials. Maybe sometimes somebody's putting 4 materials into it, and like a couple times, if you have to, you're just taking 2 link 2s into it and getting a 2 material APOLLOUSA, or 2 like a negation APOLLOUSA. I keep saying material because that's what it just makes sense in my brain. But and keep in mind, its stat is dependent. Its attack stat will be dependent on how many materials you use to make it. So if you make it with 2 monsters, it's only 1600, which means if you just have a way to summon, special summon or normal summon without even activating a monster effect that's bigger than 1600, you just beat over it. That's some of the time. But most of the time it's going to be have 3 negates on it, or 3, worth negates potentially, and which means you only have to bait 1 negate, and then it's 1600, and all you have to do is get something on board to beat over it that's bigger than 1600. Not the hardest thing to do. Not only that, but it's weak to spells and trap cards. It's weak to impermanence. If you don't have anything to protect this, like Boral Savage or Dragite or whatever, like something that can negate a spell or trap, impermanence just blanks this and makes this as good as an anima on your opponent's turn. Like, that's literally what it is. Just a link monster with 0 attack. That's all it is. Which is hilarious. Like, impermanence is not supposed to be that high impact, but versus this card, it can be if you don't have other protection. Likewise, stuff like Mind Control, any of these cards. Lightning Storm just wipes this off the field. It says nothing about that. So there's so many ways to out this card, and even when it is working, and even when it is negating, it's only negating 1, maybe 2 things. Like, usually. I guess it's like theoretically it's possible for it to negate, but it almost never does, and that's my huge problem. You see everybody throwing thumbnails of like 6 to 9 negates. This deck is wild, but they're making a 3 or 4 material APOLLOUSA and counting that as 3 or 4 negates, and it's really never going to be that. I would say if I were going to put a number on it, if you make a 3 material APOLLOUSA, I would count that as 1.5 negates. I feel like half the time you're probably just getting 1 negate out of it, and it's either getting outed or you're just going to win because you're combining it with other interruptions, or you do get the second negate off because your opponent just is playing a super heavy monster deck, or they drew a super heavy monster hand and they just had to, and then they just didn't have an out for it, like without baiting out the negates. It's so like a 3 material APOLLOUSA I would say is 1 to 2, so I'd say 1.5. And a 4 material APOLLOUSA, I'd say 2. I would just give it 2 because you're pretty consistently, after 1 negate, you're still 2400. You're not getting beaten over as easy. So she can just kind of stay up on the field. It is kind of harder to get a monster that big without using a monster effect. So I would say 2 for the Link 4. Or for the 4 material, I would say 1.5 for the Link for 3 material, and for the 1 material, just 1, like maybe almost 0.5 for that. So, like, I think like all these numbers are just inflated. Like, it's never actually going to be 3 negates, 4 negates. Like, if it is, it's because your opponent's just playing out a hand they already knew they lost, and they're just like, oh, activate monster effect, negate. Well, might as well just activate this last one just to get that negate done with, so we can just lose this duel. Like, that's when you see that actually use all 3 negates. Like, they already were going to lose, so it just doesn't even matter. Like, I don't know. It just messes with my brain, because like nobody's ever going to have like 9 negates. That's not a thing. It may be 5, 6, somewhere in that range, like max, if you're counting like the 2 negates from like a 4 material or a 3 material APOLLOUSA. So, like, I don't know. I just get irked with this card when people just blow it out of proportion. So, yeah. I just think there's too many outs. This card does not protect itself very well from spells and traps. And if anybody can just, like, bait one of its negates and then put a monster on board, it doesn't negate and destroy also. So, like, sometimes you normal summon a monster that's bigger. Like, think about, like, something simple, like Spiral Tough. You literally normal summon Spiral Tough, use the effect to try and pop APOLLOUSA. Well, they have to negate that. And then if she was a 2400, now she's 1600, and now Tough just beats over her. You didn't lose. Your opponent lost no card economy. They baited out a negate, and now they just clear your APOLLOUSA at the cost of nothing. Literally nothing. Their battle phase, pretty much. And that works. You know, I would take that if I'm the Spiral player. You know what I mean? So, yeah. That's pretty much it. I mean, I still believe it's a great card because it's so generic, because there's so many decks that can spam the board so crazily now in like where the game is. It's great to give those decks like a generic way of adding interruption to what their deck already does, but I think people just blow it out of proportion when you see all this stuff of people saying like, oh dude, you should have seen it, I had like 7 negates on board. Is it really 7 negates, or is it more like 4, maybe 5 negates? And you lose to a sphere mode. They all lose to a sphere mode. It's hilarious, all the combo decks. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't know. Let me know your guys' thoughts down below. Obviously, this is just my opinion. I still believe it's a great card. I'm not arguing that. So that's definitely not where I'm coming from. I just don't think it's ever going to represent, or like very, 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 very rarely going to actually represent 3 or 4 negates when you make it that way. So let me know your guys' thoughts. Do you think people blow APOLLOUSA out of proportion? Do you think this card should even be $100? Because that's what it is right now, which is wild. Our market is insane right now. But yeah, let me know your guys' thoughts down below on this card. Let me know if you want me to do more weird rant videos like this in the future, because there's definitely some decks that just irk me, or cards specifically that just irk me, and how people view them. And I don't know. I like talking about stuff. So let me know your guys' thoughts down on that below. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more Yu-Gi-Oh stuff from me in the future. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.